Well, it is my honor to be here with you tonight, this important day, and introducing our speaker, Marion Blumenthal Lazan. Before that, I would like to share with you some reflections on Yom Hashoah 2023. As you know, there is a big effort by our numberless enemies to deny the Shoah. It's an incredible effort. And this denial comes in many, many ways, in many, many forms. Some people would deny the existence of the Shoah in the Iranian regime. More sophisticated people will say, well, yeah, there was a killing of the Jews, but not 6 million. That's impossible. Much, much less. This is Zionist propaganda to say 6 million people. They won't do that. But Holocaust denial comes in many different flavors. There is a new flavor in the market. That flavor is to universalize the Holocaust. To speak about, there's no need for a Jewish remembrance of their genocide, because after all, many, many, many millions of people that were not Jewish were also killed in the Shoah. That's a new thing. That's, making something more universal. Genocide Day. Why Holocaust? Why Shoah Day? Why something that has to do specifically with the Jewish people? So I'm here to tell you today a little bit about that. Why it has to do specifically, particularly, and only with Jewish people. Let me give you a couple of ideas I gathered from Professor Shlomo Ben Yosef. First of all, for the Nazis, the Shoah, the Holocaust, or the war, the main purpose of the war was the final solution. On January 20, 1942, the Wannsee Conference was held. In that meeting, where the highest officials of the Nazi Germany and the leaders of the SS established the strategy for the implementation of the final solution, specifically for the Jewish. The final solution is for the Jewish problem. For them, for the Jewish problem. The Jews of Europe will be deported to occupy Poland and killed in death camps. It was decided unanimously at this conference to implement the genocide of men, women, and children, not fighters or soldiers or military. And there was not a single voice of dissent in that conference. Judenreich, for the first time in history, a government democratically elected, implemented a plan for the total annihilation of other people, but not only within the borders of Germany. The goal of the Nazis was to annihilate the Jews no matter where they were. They sought to wipe every single Jew off the face of the planet. Jews, unlike other prisoners or other people who were persecuted, had no options. Unlike in any other wars or persecutions, there was no choice for the Jews. Jews could not save themselves by surrendering, as other prisoners of war would do, or accepting the authority of the enemy, as was the case with all other European citizens. They could not save their lives even by saying, well, I abandon my religion, renouncing the religion, converting, or even being baptized. They had nowhere to go. There was nobody that Israel then. The only option left for the Jews by the Nazis was death. No surrender, no escape. And prioritizing genocide. One of the most moving movies I have seen about the Holocaust is Steven Spielberg, The Last Days, where the movie starts, and I recommend you to watch it. The movie starts by an historian revealing this incredible fact that at the end of 1944, when the Germans were being defeated by the Russians in Russia, in the Russian winter, they had to make a decision where to send our troops, where to send reinforcements. They had limited reinforcements, and there were two options. One was to send them to Russia to defend and to fight together with the army. You know what the other option was? To send these troops to Hungary to kill 500,000 Jews from there. They were still not killed. This is the end of 1944. And you know what Hitler pretty much decided? To send his troops to Hungary. Because for him, this is what Scripture says, for him, exterminating the Jews was more important than winning the war. In other words, his war was not just to conquer Europe. His main goal, the main goal of his war, was the final solution. So don't give me that this is a universal genocide day of remembrance or something like that. The Shoah is a Jewish, very Jewish memory. Finally, the best way to remember the Shoah is by you becoming a witness of the Shoah. Now we are fortunate enough that we didn't see the Shoah. Most of us don't have even parents or grandparents or family members that were killed in the Shoah. But today we have an opportunity to become witnesses because our guest speaker, Marion Blumenthal, she has seen the Shoah. She has seen, and those eyes that saw the Shoah, they are a testimony. And when we see her eyes and we listen to her words, in a way we are transforming ourselves in witnesses. Actually, if I look at her eyes, right now I am an eyewitness of the Shoah, even though I didn't see it, but I see it in your eyes. So, and the Shoah that she saw was not black and white like the documentaries we see. It was real. With the red of blood, with the metallic gray of the weapons, and with the green of the Nazi uniforms. So, before I give the microphone to Mario, I would like to light the candles, 6 candles that we really light. So if maybe I would call Chris, if you can come, please, and you can come. Yeah, please, you sir. Please come. Please come here. Just to light the candles, please. You are our guest, Mr. Blumenthal, right? Mr. Lazan, please come. Sir, please come. Yeah, come here. Mr. Lazan is Marion's husband. Sir, would you like to come, please? would like to ask you, Mr. Nova, if you come here. It is my pleasure now to invite Mr. Nova to say the tefillah Eman HaRachamim if everybody can.
Thank you, Rabbi Bitton, for giving me the opportunity to participate in this year's Yom Hashoah commemoration. And many thanks to Rabbi Ben Chaim, David Elmanian, Eli Kashi, and the committee for making this possible. And of course, I'd like to thank Mrs. Natalie Nissim, who are you, Natalie, for transporting us to and from. Thank you. This evening, I'm here with you to share my story. It is my childhood experiences during World War II in the concentration camps. I will tell you about our liberation and how we finally started, and how we finally started our lives anew in our blessed United States of America. Mine is a story that Anne Frank might have told had she survived. It is also a story that conveys a message of perseverance, determination, faith, and above all, hope. After the presentation, I will be pleased to answer some of your questions. Life in the early 1930s in Germany was very much for my family, as it is here for most of you today. Never did we think that the anti-Semitic incidents there would ever lead to very much. My father was in a successful shoe business in a small town. My parents, 2-year-older brother and I, lived comfortably with my grandparents above the shoe store. Life for Jews was made increasingly more difficult, and in 1935, the Nuremberg laws were formulated and enforced. The following are just some of the many restrictions imposed on the Jews in Germany. Jews were not allowed into theaters, into parks, or into swimming pools. All public schools were closed to Jewish children. Then there was the evening curfew for the Jews. Jews were only allowed to shop during specific hours of the day, and non-Jews were not allowed to shop in Jewish-owned stores. Non-Jews were just not allowed to associate with Jewish people. And then a big letter J for Jew was stamped on ID cards and on passports. These restrictions went on, and it was then that my parents decided to make arrangements to leave the country. My grandparents, who were in the late 70s and ill, refused to leave their home. They could not understand the urgency or the necessity of doing so. My grandparents passed away in 1938, just 11 days within each other. And soon thereafter, we received our necessary papers for our immigration to America. I was just 4 years old at that time. November 9th, 1938, Kristallnacht, or Crystal Night. It was the night of broken glass, when the Nazis and their many followers smashed the windows and the storefronts of Jewish-owned stores. Jewish establishments, synagogues, Sifrei Torah, and Jewish books were burned and destroyed. This was the beginning of a massive pogrom against the Jews in Germany, a massive verbal and physical assault against all German Jews. In reality, this was the beginning of the Shoah. On November 12th, following Kristallnacht, the German government actually fined the Jewish population for the damage caused that night. These imposed taxes were used to rearm Germany. The night of Kristallnacht, our apartment was ransacked. All valuables were thrown into a pillowcase and taken away. But worst of all was that they forcibly transported my father to a concentration camp Buchenwald in Germany. All sorts of terrible stories were related to my mother, and we did not know if we would ever see my father again. He was released after 3 weeks, only because our papers were in order for our immigration to America. And to think that just a few years prior, he had been awarded the Iron Cross for his military service in the German Army of World War I. We were forced to sell both our home and our business for a fraction of its worth. And soon thereafter, in January of 1939, we left for Holland, from where we were to sail to the United States. And for almost 9 months, while awaiting our quota number from the American State Department, my parents were assigned to take care of some 125 children. These young children had been sent by their parents from various parts of Europe to escape from the Nazis. In December of that year, 1939, we were deported to the detention camp of Westerbork in Holland to await our departure date to America. Camp Westerbork was constructed by the Dutch to accommodate Jews from various parts of Europe. In May of 1940, just 1 month before our planned departure day, the Germans invaded Holland and we were trapped. All of our belongings, which were about to be loaded on board ship, were burned and destroyed as the harbor of Rotterdam was bombed. Under Dutch control, Camp Westerbork was tolerable. My mother, father, brother, and I shared 2 small rooms. We all ate in a communal dining room, and at that time there was enough food for us so that we did not go hungry. Adults were assigned to various work duties. My father worked to repair shoes, my mother worked in the kitchen. We children had a makeshift education and lived a very dull, stagnant life. Several months later, when the Nazi SS took over the command of Westerbork, we became acquainted with the ever-present, terrifying 12-foot high barbed wire. And as thousands of Jews were rounded up, many taken from the hiding places, as was Anne Frank and her family, Camp Westerbork became overcrowded. And it was at that time that we had to share our small quarters with another family. And then the dreadful transports to the concentration and extermination camps in Eastern Europe began. This started in early 1942, and from then on, every Monday night, lists of those to be deported were posted, causing incredible anxiety, anguish, and fear. And then on Tuesday mornings, men, women, and little ones were marched to a nearby railroad platform from where they were transported. This area became known as Boulevard de l'Isère. It was an area of complete misery. At 11 o'clock on Tuesday mornings, the trains left for their destination. And of the total 120,000 men, women, and children that departed Westerbork, 102,000 were doomed never to return. In January of 1944, it was our turn to be shipped out. We children were actually glad for a change of environment. We were very naive, and we welcomed the move. We were allowed to take 1 knapsack each, and whatever we could stuff into it, we were permitted to take. When we approached the railroad platform and we saw the cattle cars in which we were to travel, our fears began to mount. Adults suspected, and they somehow knew what was in store for us. I remember that it was a bitter cold, pitch-black, rainy night when we arrived at our destination, concentration camp Bergen-Belsen in Germany. We were pulled and dragged out of the cattle cars and greeted by the German guards who were shouting at us and threatening us with their weapons and with the most vicious attack dogs by their sides. I was a very frightened 9-year-old, and to this day I still feel a certain sense of fear whenever I see a German Shepherd. Bergen-Belsen were divided into various areas. It was sectioned off and surrounded by electrified barbed wire. Guards were always in strategically placed high guard towers, and in the evenings, as soon as it would turn dark, the bright searchlights from above would constantly sweep the campgrounds. We were placed in a section that was known as the Sternlager, or the Star Camp, named so because we had to continue wearing that yellow star which had been issued to us back in Holland. Men were on one side of the camp and the women on the other, and this did make it possible at times for families to get a glimpse of one another. We were placed in this particular section of the camp with the hope of being exchanged for German nationals in Palestine, who the British put under house arrest because they were citizens of an enemy country. Unfortunately, that hope never materialized for our family. 600 of us, 600 of our people were crammed into each of the crude, wooden, heatless barracks meant for 100 when originally built. There were triple-decker bunk beds with 2 people sharing each bunk. German winters were bitter cold and very long. We were given only 1 thin blanket per bunk and a straw-filled mattress. And this bunk was our only living quarters, and that for 2 people. I was very lucky that I was able to share a bunk with my mother, and that my brother was able to share a bunk with our father. But can you imagine 2 adults, 2 strangers, sharing a bunk under such horrendous conditions? A bunk that was no larger than the small cupboard that we're all so familiar with. I remember the first time seeing a wagon filled with what I thought was firewood for the one small oven that we had in our barrack. That oven, of course, was never used. I soon realized that what was in the wagon were dead, naked bodies thrown one on top of the other. Toilets and so-called washing facilities were at a great distance in the most primitive outhouses. Toilets were long wooden benches with holes cut into them, one next to the other. There was no privacy, there was no toilet paper, there was no soap, and hardly ever any water with which to wash. And in the almost year and a half that we were in Bergen-Belsen, never once were we able to brush our teeth. There were no trees, no flowers, nor did we ever see a blade of grass. And whenever it rained, we had to slosh through the mud, adding even more misery to our very dismal existence. Every morning, every single morning, without fail, we were ordered to line up on a huge field. It was called an Appellplatz, 5 in a row as we were counted. We would have to stand there until each and every one of us was accounted for, often from early morning till late at night, without food, without water, no matter what the weather, without protective clothing. Frostbite was common. We would treat our affected toes and fingers with the warmth of our own urine. Our diet consisted of a slice of bread a day, some hot watery soup with grizzled meats and turnips and potato peel. Bread was later cut back and given to us just once a week, and only if our so-called quarters were neat and in order. Our birthday present to one another was that little piece of bread that we had saved up from the previous week. My father, who was ritually observant and became even more so as time went on, refused to eat the so-called soup because it contained non-kosher meat. He would daven and later film in secret whenever possible. Once a month, we were marched to an area to shower, and there, under the watchful eyes of the guards, we were ordered to undress. We have heard about exterminations and gas chambers in other areas of Europe, and we therefore were never sure when the faucets were turned on as to what would come out, water or gas. The Nazis did their utmost to break us physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Unfortunately, they did succeed with many of our people. It was not uncommon for people who were no longer responsible for their actions to attempt escape, even though they knew that their chance to succeed was next to impossible. But they also felt that they had nothing more to lose. The failure of their attempts were obvious when we saw their lifeless bodies hanging electrocuted against the barbed wire. Malnutrition, dysentery, and the loss of the will to go on is what destroyed body and mind. Death was an everyday occurrence. The dark, crowded quarters often caused us to trip and fall over the dead. Bodies could not be taken away fast enough. We as children saw things that no one, no matter what the age, should ever have to see. I know, of course, that you've all heard, you've read, students here have studied, many of you have seen movies and true documentaries pertaining to the Shoah. But the constant foul odor, the filth, continuous horror and fear surrounded by death is indescribable. There is no way that this can be put accurately into words or pictures. Our bodies, hair, and clothes were infested with lice. We learned that there's a distinct difference between head lice and clothes lice. Squashing them between my thumbnails became my primary pastime. Much of my time was taken up with make-believe games. One game, a game based on superstition, became very important to me. I decided that if I were to find 4 pebbles of about the same size and shape, that would mean that the 4 members of my family would all survive. My mother, my father, my brother, and I. It was a torturous, painful, very difficult game to play. What if I couldn't find the 3rd or 4th pebble? Might that mean that 1 or 2 of my family members would not go through? Nevertheless, this game gave me something to hold on to, some distant hope. After a number of months on our meager diets, our stomach shrunk so that the hunger was no longer painful. Teenagers and men suffered most from malnutrition and were the first to die. Those who lasted the longest were the women, and mothers in particular. It was their strong will to keep their children alive that kept them going. And my mother was one of those remarkable ladies. There is no doubt in my mind that it was my mother's inner strength and fortitude that finally saw us through. One day, my mother was able to smuggle some potatoes and some salt from the kitchen where she worked, and somehow managed to cook some soup in secret. This was done on our bunk. I was on the bunk with her, trying to hide and shield what she was doing. Soup was simmering, just about finished, when the German guards entered our barrack for surprise inspection. In our rush to hide that setup, the boiling soup spilled on my leg. We had been taught self-discipline and self-control the hard way, for I knew for sure, had I cried out, it would have cost us our lives. This happened in the spring of 1945. I was just 10 years old. The population in Camp Bergen-Belsen was declining rapidly, but not nearly fast enough to satisfy the Nazis. Several weeks later, it was decided to send 3 trainloads of our people to Eastern Europe, towards the extermination camps and the gas chambers. We did not know that Auschwitz, with its gas chambers, had already been liberated. My family was among the 2,500 on the last of these 3 trains. It was April of 1945. Russian army was closing in from the northeast, and the British and the Americans from the west. Under normal conditions, this train ride from Bergen-Belsen to wherever they were going to send us would have taken no more than 10 hours. But because the Germans tried to evade the Allies, we were en route for 2 long weeks without food, without water, without medical supplies, without sanitary facilities. That meant no toilets. Whenever the train came to a stop, those who were able, those who were strong enough, were permitted to get out and take a drink from a nearby stream or dig up roots to eat. My mother remembered taking some sort of a pot and collecting water from the locomotive, and who knows what else that pot was used for. The need for water at that time was almost more important than food because of the severe dehydration due to the dysentery and the high fever due to the typhus. Let me briefly explain typhus. It is a highly contagious, deadly disease that's caused from filth and spread by lice. At the same time, while the train was at a standstill, the newly dead were taken off and buried along the tracks. In addition, our train was subject to frequent air attacks by the Allies. It is truly remarkable how any one of us was able to survive under such horrendous conditions. In fact, 500 of our people, that's 1 out of every 5, died en route or shortly thereafter. My burned leg was severely infected, and it was impossible to keep the wound clean or lice-free. In late April, after 14 days of this surreal and horrifying journey, the German guards stormed frantically through the train, seeking civilian clothing so that they would not be recognized by the Allies. And we knew then that the war was coming to an end. It was the Russian army that liberated our train and led us to a nearby farm village in eastern Germany. Most of the inhabitants had fled, and we took over their homes. Kitchens were stocked with ample food. It was rich and good, actually much too good for our starved bodies. We could not tolerate that unfamiliar nourishment. And at that time, at the age of 10 and a half, I weighed 60 kilos, or as we know it here, 35 pounds. And my mother weighed a mere 70 pounds. The Russians, in a crude way, tried to help us the best that they could. I was brought to a nearby clinic for medical attention. My leg was in very bad condition, and I was close to losing it. Fortunately, it was decided to treat the wound, and I was very lucky that my leg responded to medication, and it gradually healed. As I regained my strength, I also learned to walk. And in the interim, our heads were shaved, because that was the only way that we could rid ourselves of head lice. Although we were all weak, ill, and thoroughly exhausted, I vividly remember the spring of 1945. The weather was beautiful, sunny and bright, trees and grass were lush and green, flowers were in bloom, birds were singing. It was a wonderful, exciting feeling to be free at long last. We were all ill with typhus, but my father had to die from it 6 weeks after our liberation. And this after 6.5 years of mental torment and physical abuse. My 12-year-old brother Albert actually helped bury our father. When I talk about those years, it is as though I'm relating a nightmare, a very bad dream. I separate myself from it ever having happened to me, and that is how I deal with it. It is a wonderful story how we gradually recuperated and were sent back to Holland to start our lives anew. My brother and I were eventually placed in a children's home, in the Youth Aliyah home, in preparation to live in what was then British-mandated Palestine, and we know today as Israel. Most of the children in this home survived alone, without their parents. I felt like a total misfit. I needed to learn how to resettle into a normal society. Had no training for that. Here I was by this time, 11 years old. I had never been in a store. I had no idea what money was all about. I had almost no table manners. It was like learning to live all over again. It was in this home that we became reacquainted with life in its normal state. Meals served us were delicious and nourishing. You can imagine that just about anything and everything tasted good to us. And though our surrogate parents provided a very strict environment, much love and care were given us. I began my first formal education at that time at the age of 11 and a half. We were taught the secular subjects, reading, writing, arithmetic, in a Montessori school where we progressed at our own pace. The Dutch language in which we were taught was all new to us. We also received a thorough education in Hebrew and in religious studies. The British, who were governing Palestine in the 1940s, had issued what was known as the White Paper, restricting the number of Jews permitted into the land, and they were intercepting many of the refugee ships and interning the survivors on the island of Cyprus, and in some cases, turning the ships back to Europe. In November of 1947, the United Nations voted to partition Palestine between Arabs and Jews, which in May of 1948 led to the establishment of the State of Israel. In 1947, just 1 year prior to Israel becoming a state, our illegal voyage from Holland to Palestine was planned, and danger once again loomed over us. And because parents at that time were not permitted to accompany their children, my mother managed to make arrangements for a family of 3 to emigrate to the United States. And thanks to the Holland America line, we were able to use the tickets which had been purchased 10 years earlier. We arrived in Hoboken, New Jersey, April 23rd, 1948. By coincidence, exactly 3 years to the day of our liberation. It was the Hebrew Immigration Aid Society, the Hayas, that found a home for us in Peoria, Illinois. I'd never heard of Illinois, definitely not Peoria. And there, at the age of 13, I once again started life anew in a strange land and again learning a new language. My 3rd new language in less than 3 years. First Dutch, then Hebrew, and now English. And because of my inability to speak English, I, at the age of 13, was placed in the 4th grade with 9-year-olds. Although both my brother and I worked long hours after school to help our mom pay bills, I nevertheless found time, I actually made time, to take extra courses during the year, attend summer school, and by working very hard in my studies, I was able to be graduated from Peoria Central High School 5 years later at age 18, ranking 8th in the class of 267 students. It was 2 months after high school graduation that I was married to Nathaniel Lazan, who I had met at the age of 16 on Yom Kippur in Shul in Peoria. And God willing, we'll be celebrating our 70th wedding anniversary. Nathaniel was an Air Force pilot, and of course he's very disciplined and very conscientious. He's amazing. Yeah. I am grateful, I am very grateful that I survived healthy in body, mind, and spirit, and that together with my husband, I'm able to perpetuate my heritage with a wonderful family. We have 3 grown children, all 3 are happily married, and have given us 9 beautiful grandchildren and 11 magnificent, extraordinary great-grandchildren. Amazing, amazing. I refer to that as survival and continuity, right? And in March of 1996, my memoir, 4 Perfect Pebbles, co-authored by Lila Pearl, was published by Green Willow Division of HarperCollins. And my dear friend Joan Newman is here. Joan introduced me to Lila Pearl, so Joan, if it weren't for you, maybe this would not have happened, and maybe I wouldn't even be here. But I think I would be here anyway, even without the book. But thank you for introducing me to you. And HarperCollins decided to do a 20th anniversary edition. This is a little klutzy, okay. This is the 20th anniversary edition that Harper decided to do. I definitely do not like this cover. And I know it's because of the barbed wire, but you know, Harper was in charge, so this is it. It has been translated into German, into Dutch. Yad Vashem published it beautifully in Hebrew, Ava, Avanim Shlamot. Super job. This is my image when I was 7. And if you like, you may all read it in Japanese. Maybe there's someone here who can do just that. But above all, I am so grateful that the story is in book form so that it can be passed on to future generations. And I'm thrilled that a documentary has been made entitled Marion's Triumph with the actress Deborah Messing as the narrator. So you see that despite all the terrible things that happened to me as a child, my life today is full and rewarding. Although I've spoken to upward of 2 million students and adults over these past 30-some years, it still has not become easy. However, I do realize the importance of sharing that period of our history with you, simply because in a few short years, we will not be here any longer to give a first-hand account. You, the young people here this evening, it is your generation that is the last generation that will hear these stories firsthand. And I therefore ask you in particular to please share my story or any of the Holocaust stories that you read and hear about. Share it with your friends, share it with your relatives, and someday share them with your children, and yes, even with your grandchildren. When we are not here any longer, it is you who will have to bear witness. As difficult as it is, the horror of the Shoah must be taught, must be studied, and kept alive. Only then can we guard it from ever happening again. This is the very yellow star that I was forced to wear. It says Jude, which in German means Jew. It was just another way to denigrate us, to isolate us, and to set us apart from the rest of society. This, of course, represents our Magen David, a beautiful, meaningful Jewish symbol. But the Nazis made it so very ugly. Each of us, each and every one of us must do everything in our power to prevent such hatred, such destruction, and such terror from reoccurring. And we can begin by having love, respect, and tolerance towards one another, regardless of the religious belief, regardless of the color of our skin, regardless of the national origin. This respect towards one another must begin in our homes, around the kitchen table, dining room table, wherever we gather as a family. We, the adults, must pass it on our places of business. You, the students here this evening, pass it on in your schools, in your classrooms, in the halls of your schools, communities, towns, cities, and only if there's respect and tolerance towards one another in the countries can we expect peace in the world. We must begin with our children. Let us treat people as individuals. Let us look for similarities and respect the differences. Let us build bridges and reach out towards one another. And we must be true to ourselves and not blindly follow a leader without thinking ahead and searching our hearts and our minds as to what the consequences might be. When I speak in schools, I'll tell the young people, it is not cool to follow just anyone's lead without first checking to see what his or her true intentions are. Please, please let us all remember these messages and let us all live by them. We are all aware, or we should be, that 6 million Jewish people were murdered during the Shoah. 6 million. The population of Long Island, both Suffolk and Nassau County, is approximately 3 million. Can you possibly imagine twice the population of Long Island wiped out? The 6 million also represent 1/3 of the entire pre-World War II Jewish population. Among them were 1.5 million children, just like the children who are here this evening. We also need to remember that there were 5 million non-Jews who lost their lives. Among them were the righteous Gentiles, as we refer to them, very special people, non-Jews who jeopardized their lives to save Jewish families. They would hide them in their attics. They would hide them in the basements. Farmers would hide them out in the barns. They were hidden in convents. And when these good people were caught doing what they thought was the right thing to do, they also were deported to concentration camps and in many cases lost their lives. And that brings me to another message. We must never generalize and judge an entire group by the actions of some within that group. These are all universal messages, messages that we're all familiar with to varying degrees, but need to be reminded of over and over again. And this certainly was a good opportunity to do so. These messages are the lessons learned from that dark period of our history, and certainly apply to today's world situation, and definitely to our own individual lives. By listening, I hope that our young people prevent our past from becoming their future. I'd now like to share something with you about an extraordinary lady, my mother. This was my mother on her 104th birthday. Amazing lady. Mom passed away 6 weeks short of her 105th birthday. Outstanding lady, wise, beautiful, and there were two things I really would like to show her off. How do I do this best? Wait a minute. Okay, first of all. Okay, here you go. There you go. Good. Okay. There were two things that my mother demanded of my brother and me when we first came to America. Number one, learn English. Learn it quickly. Number two, work as hard as you can in school and at work in order to succeed. She was something else. She was 40 years old when we came to America. 40. Knew absolutely no English. Learned to read, write, and speak a magnificent English. And when Mom was still with us, we were 5 generations of women, 5 really strong women. And again, I refer to that as survival and continuity. And she was a fabulous, wonderful mother-in-law to Nathaniel, and he was an extraordinary son-in-law to my mom, 2 very special people. My brother, Albert, passed away a few years ago, dealt with this altogether differently than I. Did not talk about it as freely as you heard it from me this evening. Was happily married, lived in California, but by choice did not bring children into this world. Had a very difficult time with organized religion. All of that made me very sad. But I did not fault Albert. You have to remember, he was 2 years older than I am, was with my father in the men's section, and I'm convinced that he saw and experienced things that I did not. Hashem puts us in this earth, gives us a beautiful mind. It is this mind that allows us to choose right from wrong, good from evil. Therefore, men did this towards one another. Not that he had to make it so bitterly cold when we were standing on that pell all day. I have a direct line. I ask loads of questions. Don't get too many answers, but that's okay. Faith I will always have. After all, here I am, 3 children, 9 grandchildren, 11 great-grandchildren, of whom generations will be forthcoming. He made sure that enough of us survived so that we will always be here. I am proud of my faith. When I speak to a mixed crowd, I tell them I'm sure that they're proud of their faith and of their heritage. But please, please, let us all remember to respect the right of others to their belief. Be kind and good and respectful towards one another. That is the basis for peace. Had there been respect and tolerance towards one another some 70, 80 years ago, I would not be here this evening to share that dark period of our history with you. 9/11 would not have occurred. Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, the Ukraine, all these countries that are in such turmoil would be peaceful countries for its people. Be kind and good and respectful towards one another, please. It is such a simple message and yet so difficult to achieve. There's very little that we can do against the negativity in our world, but how we treat, behave, and reach out towards one another, that is entirely up to us. Did I ever find my 4 pebbles? It's a frequently asked question. I always found my 4 pebbles. Made it my business to find them. She did all the time. When I would find them, I put them in a safe place. Next time I would search for them, and I couldn't find the 3rd one or the 4th one, well, I knew exactly where to go and pick them up. Maybe that was cheating, but it was my game, and guess who made the rules? You need to know I was only about 9 or 10 years old when things were at its absolute worst. We had nothing to occupy our time with constructively. No paper, no pencils, no books, no games, certainly. So I was very fortunate to have had such an imaginative mind, and my imaginative games were always based on a positive attitude. Whenever the sun would shine in that part of Germany, and that didn't happen nearly often enough, I would find and search for and find a piece of glass or a piece of America. And when the sun would shine, that little piece of glass would cast a reflection onto the ground. And that little wiggly reflection, it became my pet. As long as the sun would shine, I would have my pet, and my pet would never ever die. I would also imagine that one day I would have my 3 Bs, and these 3 Bs represent our everyday comforts and necessities that we all take so much for granted. First B represented a bed. I knew that someday I once again would have my very own bed with a real mattress, clean sheets, and enough blankets to keep me warm. Second B represented a bath, warm water, soap, clean towel, with that would come toothpaste and a toothbrush, of course. And the third B was bread. I knew that someday I once again would have enough bread so that I would never again go hungry. These imaginative games were my survival techniques. They were my survival skills. Do you know that we all have survival techniques within us? When the need arises, we just have to search for them, find them, and be sure that we put them to work. No one is spared adversity. No one is spared hardship. We all have to overcome obstacles in one way or another. But with perseverance, with determination, with faith, and above all hope, one can overcome just about anything and everything. Above all, never ever give up hope. It's not so much what happens to a person, it's how we deal with the situation that makes the difference. I have lots more to share, but maybe I should just wind down. Okay. Okay. Nathaniel's from New York. No, I shouldn't tell him that you were from New York. Yeah? Okay. Okay. Good Patsy. She decided I shouldn't tell him. Anyway, when we came to America in 1948, we were told the night before that in approach New York Harbor, we were told the night before that if we wanted to see the Statue of Liberty, we needed to be on deck bright and early the next morning. Well, you can be sure that each and every one of us was on deck to greet and be greeted by that magnificent symbol of freedom, the freedom that had been denied us for so many years. And when that tall figure of that longed-for symbol appeared, I became too choked up to talk. So many emotions seized me at once: joy and gratitude, bitterness for the cruelties we and many others had endured, and deep, deep sadness that my father would never know that we had reached America at last. And to this day, when we cross the Verrazano Bridge, I will always crane my neck to see the Statue of Liberty. It's the most beautiful, meaningful sight. I'll take a few questions because the evening is getting late. I have plenty more to share with you, but okay. Any questions? Anyone? You were all wonderful. It's a late evening. I do want to wish each and every one of you, your children, your grandchildren, and all succeeding generations a healthy, happy, productive future in a world of love and peace.
Amen.
Thank you. Yes, I will take questions and answers.
We never met, you know, in person, so I don't know. Okay. Oh, well, welcome home. Okay.
Okay, we have some questions and answers. Anybody raise your hand? Okay.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank you for coming and sharing your story with us. It's very important and it's very interesting. I grew up in Israel and I know a lot about the Yom Hashoah. And of course, as you said, it's very important. Everybody, not even Jewish people, everybody in the world should know about the Shoah. And we have to talk about it, right? But the question is, since I grew up in Israel, and I remember in school, every year we heard more and more stories, and we take it very seriously. We went to the Museum of Yad Vashem, and all this is necessary. But my question is, as a child, I think when very young children, when they hear these stories, I don't know what feeling it gives to them, and how they see the world and the countries and the leaders in the world, how they grew up with this thinking, and maybe it damaged them. I want to ask you, from what age you think it's important, but from what age is good to start telling the children about the Shoah?
Okay, you all heard the question. What age do I think is appropriate for children to learn about the Shoah? I think the age of 10.
Is appropriate. It depends on, this was not a very graphic presentation, not really. And I think it is suitable for them. I mean, at these 10-year-olds, they watch everything on television, and this is, unfortunately, is history, and they need to know about it. So I think the age of 10 is about right. It depends how it is presented. When I speak to students, I have other stories that would be more suitable for them. Okay, I didn't want to spend too much time on that here this evening. But age of 10 is good. Anyone else?
We're going to pick a young audience. Hold on.
Any students?
Any students? Any students first before? Questions from any students?
Hi, this is Angela. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I want to know, through all the hardship you were going through, how were you able to keep your faith? Like, you seem very proud of your heritage, and I mean, you accomplished a lot, but while you were going through it, how were you able to keep your faith and be proud of who you were and your identity as a Jew?
Okay, first of all, can you hear me without this? Yes. Yeah, they can hear me. I was very, sorry,
Exercise, okay. First of all, I was very young at that time. That makes a huge difference. As you heard me say, my brother, only 2 years older, suffered much more, and those who were older than that, even more so, no doubt. And I was so enormously fortunate that I was always with my mother. And she had a wonderful, positive attitude towards life. Of course, there were times when we were despondent, but we wouldn't allow to have that negative thought stay with us for very long. It would have been very destructive. There were people who weighed a few kilos more than we, but they didn't have the inner strength and perseverance that my mother had, and that probably did not make it. But I'm a firm believer that your mental attitude has much to do with your physical well-being. I really do believe that. Okay. Yes.
Hi. You know, there is lots of newfound anti-Semitism in USA. Having lived through that day. Like for instance, in Manhattan, when you walk, you don't really see a lot of people with a yarmulke anymore. What's your recommendation based on what you went through and what you suggest?
No, I wish I had an answer. I really don't know. I don't know why. I think it's ignorance, it's lack of education, it's what they, I just don't, it's beyond sad, beyond sad. And I don't have an answer to that. I wish I did. Maybe you can help me. Yeah. And it's just, you know, we have to start with our children to make them understand the importance of being respectful towards one another. If it's respect, they wouldn't do this to one another, no matter what the religious belief, no matter what the color of skin. Okay, I'm sorry, I wish I had an answer.
Were you scared when you were younger?
What is that?
Were you scared when you were younger?
I was plenty scared. You know, it's interesting that you should say that. I'm often asked, what was the worst thing for me to deal with while I was in the camps? As far as I'm concerned,
The worst thing for me was to deal with the emotion of fear. Yes, I was always afraid of what would happen to us next. Would my mother come back from her work duties? Who would die next? We were in pain, we were thirsty, we were hungry, but for me, the emotion of fear was most difficult to deal with, for sure. Okay? Did I answer your question, right, young man? Okay. I'm so glad that you were here. Yeah.
So last question, guys.
So you mentioned that you were 10 years old when this all happened, and that your father was a World War I German Iron Cross recipient, which is like an equivalent of a Purple Heart in the American military.
exactly.
At 10 years old, as being a German nationalist and having your dad serve the country, seeing the Germans turn on you and treat you the way they treated you, how did that make you feel? How did that change your view on life?
You mean at that time?
At that time and looking back in hindsight?
Yeah, at that time I was 5 years old. You know,
At that time, I was 5 years. Did you all hear the question? How did I feel when they imprisoned my father after having served in the German army for World War I? He got the equivalent of the Purple Heart, and when I was 5 years old, I personally, I didn't, but my mother must have felt betrayed, for sure, as do so many others. But there was really no choice. We had no choice but to go along with what they told us to do and go and so on. And so that was it. But it was a betrayal, 100%, for sure. And all of this was much more difficult for adults than it was for children. So that's it, yeah.
You were shielded from your mother, shielding you from all of this.
Oh yes, 100%. And I'm so grateful to my mother that she had such strength and never gave in, never gave up. There was very little sadness. We knew it was going to get better. We were hoped. And it did get better. We willed it. When there's a will, there's a way, but doesn't always hold true either. But I was just very fortunate to have that attitude towards life because of my mother, for sure. Okay? So once again, I thank each and every one of you this
I'm going to say Hatikva just before that.
I do have books out there. If anyone is interested, I'd be glad to inscribe them, so whenever you...
Our speaker has books outside. Just 1 second for Atikva, but Sean and Kimi has a message first.
Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Just want to let everyone know that we're planning a very special event next week for Yom Hashoah. It'll be 7:30 here at 54 Steamboat, serving a meat dinner. There's going to be entertainment, DJ, really great celebration. So please try to make it next week Tuesday night, starting at 7:30.
I'm going to have Robert Nabat sing Atikva, please.
ברשות מוריי ורבותיי, ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר קידש לנו במצוותיו וציוונו על ספירת העומר היום 13 יום לעומר, שם שבוע אחד ב6 ימים.
שבוע אחד ב6 ימים.